Hello, thank you for coming along to this channel. My name is Janet. I am working through the King James's Bible. Today I am beginning the book of Kings. Now this book originally was one book, but it has now been split into two books. Just to give you a little bit of information on this book, who wrote it, nobody really seems to know, but on doing some research I found out that the main person named is the prophet Jeremiah. That's who they think wrote it. Now these two books span 500 years, so to me it can't have just been one person. There must have been a number of people who have written this book, and it covers the rise and fall of kingdoms, really. The kings themselves, their reigns, and I'm sure there's going to be a lot of details on those that flourished and those that crumbled. We will read on today as we begin chapter 1, so stay tuned and we'll get started. So as we begin chapter 1, we learn that King David is getting very old now. So he's coming to the end of his life, and he's not as active, obviously, in his reigning over the people, because it's saying at the start of here, he's very cold, he can't seem to keep warm. So his servants, they think that bringing him a virgin young woman will help keep his heart warm. Also, she can help him with chores and it's conversation. That's kind of how it's played out. She's not someone he's going to sleep with. She's just someone there to keep his heart warm, I guess. That's how they've described it. And the young woman to take this role is named Abishag, and she is a Shumanite. Now, as David isn't so active in his duties, his presumptuous son, Adonijah, thinks that he should be king. So he proclaims himself that. He gathers a lot of men together, 50 in total, who run before him and sort of make this big noise with chariots that he is to be proclaimed the new king. Now it says that David didn't do anything to prevent this. Whether he knew about it or not, it just says that he didn't do anything to prevent it, and that his son was actually a good-looking guy, which again was like his other brother, Absalom, who took over the role by basically creating this marketing campaign and stealing the hearts of the people. He then sort of got them to create this kind of rebellion against the king himself. So it looks like this son is following in the same footsteps as his brother Absalom, and we all know what happened to him. If you didn't know, check out the second book of Samuel and you will find all the details in there. So Adonijah decides to put on a feast in honour of his new kingship, and he invites a lot of people, bar the ones really that were closest to David. So people like the prophet Nathan, the priest Zadok, his son, David's son, Solomon, they were all not invited. Now Nathan goes to Bath-sheba, and she is the mother of Solomon, David's son. And Nathan tells her what is going on, that Adonijah is proclaiming himself to be king. Now if this happens, this means Solomon's life will be at risk and hers as well. He wants her to go to King David, tell him what's going on, and then say to him, look, you said that Solomon would be king. You made an oath with the Lord. And he said, you go in and say that to David, and I'll come in behind you and back up your words. So Bathsheba agrees, and she goes to see King David. So she goes in and greets the king, and she tells him all that is going on, that your son Adonijah is proclaiming that he is now king. This means that your son Solomon, who you told would be king, will be at risk, and my life will be at risk as well. Now he's having this feast without the men that are important to you. They have not been invited, so he's doing it behind your back. What are you going to do about it? And then in comes Nathan the prophet, and he agrees with her, that yes, this is happening. I've been there, I've not been invited, the others, and he's sort of taken this on, that he will be the king without your okay. So David, on hearing this news, immediately works to put the situation right. So he gets his son Solomon, and he has him anointed. He gets the priests together, and they do the official ceremony. King Solomon is now proclaimed king in front of all of the Israelites, who rejoice, and they are happy that they feel that yes, he is the man to take on the next role as king. So the trumpets are blown, and obviously this noise goes out throughout the land of Israel. And Adonijah there, who's having this feast with all his people, Job, which is David's army captain, he's there, and he said, "What's that noise going on? Why is people all rejoicing?" And Jonathan, who is the son of Abiathar, the priest, he explains that Solomon has now been proclaimed the king. And that is why all the people are rejoicing, because this is who it's meant to be. Now, the people at this banquet, along with Adonijah, they start feeling fearful, like if they find out they're here now celebrating the king that isn't the king anymore, it's Solomon, something could happen to them. So they quickly disperse and leave Adonijah pretty much on his own. Now Adonijah becomes fearful. He's like, "Oh my goodness, my brother might kill me now if he finds all this out." So he goes to the tabernacle, which is where the Lord is, and he grabs hold of the horns of the altar and he won't let go because he's like, "No, Solomon will kill me. I'm not letting go." So it's his way of kind of trying to save himself. Now King Solomon says, "Look, I'm not going to kill you as long as you are a worthy man. If you do wickedness or evil in any way, then that is the immediate death sentence for you." And that closes chapter 1. So in chapter 2, David's reign as king is over. He's now passed on the role to his son Solomon. So in doing so, he's also passing on his knowledge and how to move forward in this new role as king. So he begins by telling him to be strong and to prove himself as a man. Always to follow God's laws, God's statutes, God's commandments as written in the book of law by Moses. These are critical points that he makes to his son. It's kind of like, be a great leader, but be obedient to God. Next, David informs Solomon of Job's wrongdoings. That's his army captain. I mean, he was a bloodthirsty man. He was out there fighting the battles and he killed a lot of innocent men. So David is saying this cannot go unrecognised. Justice has to prevail and justice needs to be done to Job. So he's letting him know that he didn't do good things. He also highlights Bahuriam, who was the one who threw stones at him and cursed him when he was in exile, running away from his son Absalom. So this needs to be noted and justice needs to be done. Then he goes on to explain the people who have done good in his life, like Barzillai. He was the Gileonite, and he was the one who was very loyal to David. So all of these things, the good and the bad, are noted so that Solomon can be a great leader as he starts, and he can bring justice to what's already gone by. It's like they're not going to be forgotten with King David. They will be carried on, and the rightful things will be done as he passes on that role to his son Solomon. Then sadly David dies and he is buried in the city of David. Now it's noted that he reigned for 40 years over Israel. It was 7 years over Hebron and then Jerusalem for 33 years, making that 40 years in total. So then we see Solomon sitting on his throne, kind of like looking over his kingdom because now he really is on his own. Now Adonijah, his brother, goes to Bath-sheba, Solomon's mother, and he asks him, he's like, "Look, now that my brother is king and I didn't get to have that role, I'm asking you if you will ask my brother Solomon if I can have," this is King David, remember at the beginning of chapter 1, Abishag. He wants her, the young virgin, as his wife. That's what he's asking. And so Bathsheba says, "Okay, I will ask my son." And so she does. So she kind of has a seat right next to her son, King Solomon, and she asks him exactly what Adonijah has asked. And Solomon, as soon as he hears this, knows immediately what Adonijah is up to, and that is it. He's like, right, he's going to be killed. Why, you might ask? Because Adonijah is taking his father's concubine, really. That's who she is. And in the book of law, that is not allowed. You don't do that. He's kind of trying to undermine the king. And that's a slippery slope, which Solomon, it's like, nope, as soon as anything is not right, he puts it right. And he did tell his brother that if there was any acts of wickedness, that death would be the answer. And so Adonijah is put to death. Next in line is the priest Abiathar. Now, he sided with Adonijah to become king. He was at that festival, he was there, following along. Now, he's not to be killed, but his priesthood is taken away from him. Solomon recognizes that, he did carry that Ark of the Covenant in front of his father all of those years. So that is to be recognized as well. So that exempts him from death, and he is to be placed in exile. So that's what happens to that priest. King Solomon next commanded that Job, the man that his father had told him had killed a lot of innocent men, was to be killed. Now Job, I don't know how he got to know this, but Job finds out and he runs into the tabernacle and he grabs the horns of the altar in there and he won't let go. So Solomon's servant Benaniah, he is ordered to kill Job, and that's what he does because he's murdered all of these innocent men. This is to cleanse the land, really, of the wickedness that Job has done. And Benaiah, who killed Job, then steps into his role. He then becomes the captain over the army for King Solomon. And Zadok is the main priest now without Abiathar. Now Shemiah is the next to be sentenced. He was the one who was the servant to King Saul, so we're going back to those days. Because he was a threat to his father David. And he can't leave it because if he does, he'll be put to death. Now Shemiah agrees to this and he thinks this is really, good what he's allowed him. He's allowed him to live and to live in this home. Now what happens to him is, after 3 years, 2 of his slaves flee and he goes chasing after them, which means he's left his homeland, gets them, brings them back. Somebody saw him do this and they notify King Solomon, and unfortunately Solomon sticks to the rules that he's put down and he said, you've gone against your oath, you now will be sentenced to death. And so his army sergeant Benaiah is the one to do the job and he kills Shemiah. So there we have it. This closes chapter 2 and it just shows you how strong King Solomon is. He's sticking to his guns. He's listened to his father. He is getting rid of all the evil and he is sticking to what he says. And we'll see as the chapters progress how that carries on. So thanks for listening. Thanks for being here. And I'll be back again with more chapters in the Book of Kings very soon. Take care now. Bye.